Do you realise that not all VC models are created equally? There are good practice approaches and approaches that are not so good. Where could you be losing thousands of dollars in productivity? I want to start with a common example. Often we're filtering colours for a product. And so with the product, we want to display certain colours meeting certain criteria. So out of a list of 100 colours, 20 may be applicable. If your VC modelers have not had great training and have not learned good approaches, and potentially the solution is based around preconditions put on the characteristic values of the color. And so if you've got 15 colors, this may not be a big deal. You know, the model updates can be fairly straightforward, but just remember the logic is kept on each color value. So if you've got 100 colors, 500 colors, 1,000 colors, it really becomes a nightmare over time, because all that logic is tied up in that number of preconditions, and to make a change can take a lot of time. So I've got an example from a company where to make a color change, it would take them 2 to 3 days to get that color change coded and into production. That's a long time to wait. And this was due to the way they approached their model design. If that's the wrong way, what's the right way? Well, the good practice way is using constraints and variant tables, and there can be multiple constraints and multiple variant tables. So essentially what you're doing is putting the relationships in the variant table, so all the characteristics that influence the color, columns in the table, and point to the applicable colors that should apply. That color selection can be more complicated, and you might have 2 or 3 other relationships that also need to be taken into account, and they can also be represented in variant tables. And then you create constraints for each of those variant tables, and when SAP runs its logic, it's very much like a Venn diagram that you learned at school. You're looking for the intersection of the circles of data, and that intersection is the filtered list. So essentially with constraints, you can do that. And the beauty of it is that instead of having to trawl through 100, 200, 500 preconditions to sort out all the logic, often it just comes down to a simple task of maintaining additional rows or taking rows out of a variant table. And so the practical result of that is when this company, who were taking 2 to 3 days to do color changes, after making the change in the modeling approach, they got down to, I think, 30 minutes, maybe an hour to do the changes. So one, they saved a lot of time in just making the color changes with labor resources to do that. But on the other side, it also enhanced their sales, because, they could make the changes more dynamically and potentially not lose sales. That's where, you can save thousands of dollars just with your modeling approaches. I suppose it is how do VC modelers get trained? VC modelers can get their training in various ways, and some companies will invest in training, some won't. And so many VC modelers and even consultants quite often get free training. And by free training, I mean SAP Help online or YouTube videos. Now, SAP Help, it's a reference resource really, and it's probably okay for that. But if you're learning VC from SAP Help, then you're really digging a hole for yourself, because it's likely not going to teach you the good approaches. And so you'll end up in case one, 2 to 3 days to do a simple change. YouTube, I've watched a few videos of people demonstrating how VC works, and they're even scarier because in most cases you can tell that perhaps they learned from SAP Help and have created a video on how VC work. I would not trust those at all, really. So that's some of your free options. So the other common option is from SAP Press, the Variant Configuration book, which is well known in the VC community. It is a good resource, a good reference. I wouldn't say it teaches you how to approach VC. I've had comments from VC modelers I've worked with who At the start, they bought the book before they knew not much about VC modeling, and the book was hard work and confusing. But once they knew VC model, then they found it to be a great reference. The variant configuration, yeah, I think you get it as a reference, but don't necessarily learn from it. The other is SAP obviously run a couple of courses devoted to VC, PLM 145 and PLM 146. So they do contain a lot of data. I've actually delivered those training courses to learners. My impression is there's an information overload in simple terms. There's so much information in there, and even over 4 or 5 days, it feels like overload for the learners. And it, again, doesn't really teach how to approach VC models, how to think about them, and use the right techniques in the right place. So I would say, in summary, you could use that as a supplement to your training, where you want to get maybe a bit more in depth, but would be good to go into it knowing something before you do that. The other source can be consulting companies. So often on a new implementation, you might have one of the very large consulting companies as your implementation partner, and they may be developing VC and providing the training. Point of caution is that often in those companies, they may not have expert VC resources. Because you've got to remember, like, VC is only a small piece of the total customer base, the SAP around the world, and therefore the consultants are often not exposed to it that often, and if they are, it's quite new to them. You could end up in the same boat as learning from SAP Help. Not saying that's true in all cases, but check out those consultants. The other consulting companies out there are the ones that specialize in VC, and they would be the ones that, if you're looking for a partner, that's probably your best option. And some of them offer training, often at their premises, not always on site, but at least they know their stuff. That's their core business. But just remember, their core business is often consulting, not training. Their focus is a bit more that way. So lastly, and I suppose if you've got this far, you're probably thinking, oh, okay, this is the selling point for Radiant Think. And sure, it is. We have our VC Essentials online self-paced course, and we believe it is, well, at least the only online course in the world, takes a VC modeler mindset and approaches of how to approach model design, so that you end up in that second scenario where you can more efficiently update and maintain your models on an ongoing basis. We've done that very deliberately because I found in my early days I couldn't find the good training. Over the years, through the CWG and other experts and my network, I came with a course structure that follows that approach. And so we start from nothing and we build up a model and using good practice approaches. So it's called VC Essentials because it's essentially got all the essential parts that, it's constraint-based approach, which is recommended by SAP. And I think it's very cost-effective. So many companies around the world use it as part of their internal training, and they come back again and again as they have new people start. And it can be good for project teams as well to get familiar with VC from the outset. Speeds up model development. Yeah, basically for $1,000 a learner, we think that is a good investment that will more than pay for itself. So small cost, big benefit. Anyway, I'm Phil from Radiant Think. Thanks for your time, and I'll catch you next time.